Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. I have been grinding the last couple of days on Black Ops 7, going through, maxing all my weapons. I've just unlocked the Singularity Mastery camo in multiplayer, and so today I wanted to go through and break down every single weapon in the game. We are here on COD Community on the meta ranking section here. We're going to go through and we've got every single weapon listed, every rifle, SMG, LMG, so on and so forth, and rank them where they fall in the general meta. So you guys know if you're going through and leveling up your weapons, which ones to maybe focus on across the absolute meta category, the meta contenders, just general competitive weapons, and then probably what you want to avoid down in the trash category as well. And this is something that will periodically update throughout the year for multiplayer. Obviously, once the Warzone integration takes place, we'll also be doing heavy meta focus there as well, with a similar ranking and breakdown every time we see meta updates throughout the year. So stay tuned for all that if you want to always stay in the know for what weapons to use, what weapons to avoid, what's good, what's not. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications. But let's dive in. Let's start first with our assault rifles here. This is a really versatile category, and what I really like about the rifle category this year is that, quite frankly, all of these rifles feel unique, with the exception of, I would say, the AK and the Mirage that have very similar play styles and handling and even stats as well. Everyone sort of has its own definitive little play style here. Now, they did just do a decent meta update, literally like right before I recorded this video, that ended up adjusting some of these guns. For instance, like the mod was absolute meta, but they did go through and they nerfed it relatively well. I'd say right now, the mod is like borderline meta contender and just a competitive weapon. I would go more towards contender here, because in core it's still going to be an aggressive rifle. It's almost like an AR SMG hybrid, but even like when you play hardcore, this is a gun now that gets multiple hit markers, which is insane in hardcore. I have SMGs and pistols that outperform that, so this is definitely not as dominant as it was literally like 48 hours ago when I'm recording this video. So it's still a good weapon, but definitely not the absolute #1 meta that it was for the first few days of the game. The Peacekeeper I would consider to be more of a meta contender here. It's really like just borderline absolute meta. It's control and its overall damage over range is what's going to limit it some. It really feels like it's a weapon that thrives the most in the mid-range, which luckily plays into a lot of the Black Ops 7 maps here. It's really aggressive as well, but it does have some recoil, and it's got a little bit of a faster fire rate as well, so your damage per mag might be a little bit iffy depending on what magazine you're running, but overall a really solid rifle. The MXR-17 to me is an absolute meta choice, because not only is it relatively easy to use, especially if you stack like a compensator, recoil spring, something of that nature on it to help out with the control. If you're just simply are good at aiming to the upper body, like headshots on this thing, absolutely insane. This thing just straight up rips. It's probably my favorite weapon and definitely my favorite rifle in the game. It just is so satisfying to use. A little bit of a slower fire rate, so you do have to make your shots count, but I don't think it's too difficult to stay on target with this thing, especially when you max it out. And like I said, if you hit just one headshot in a gunfight, the thing shreds. AK-27 likely going to be more of like a meta contender here. It's just a really well-rounded rifle. They did nerf the control on it a little bit. It's not the most aggressive thing in the world, but for the most part, it is still a very strong choice here. Can have some really good damage out into the like early long range and whatnot if you're comfortable with the recoil control. Overall, just a really solid rifle here. The Mirage is just really not all that, in my opinion. I mean, this is one that just feels a little bit clunky, a little bit awkward here. I'd say this is more of like a viable rifle, but it's not going to be anything that special. Like the AK-27 is just the Mirage, but good. You don't really have a huge reason to use it. And then the Maverick is kind of an interesting one, because it really relies on you being good with first guns, and it can be very, very good. This thing's like the biggest laser beam in the game. It has like no recoil between the bursts and everything. Its damage is not insane, especially over range, so it's probably going to end up just being more of like a meta contender here. Just overall a really strong rifle, like most of them are. It's a nice balance between this category. Next up here, we've got the SMGs, and these are all definitely on the up and up. They're paying a little bit more attention to them, but as a whole category, SMGs still feel a little bit underwhelming in some situations, which is kind of interesting because usually subs go crazy. But first up, the Dravik, I'm just going to say this one is a meta contender as well, largely because of its versatility. It's absolutely one of the easiest SMGs to use in the game. Some of these got some very funky recoil and are a little bit awkward to use, but this one is good out into the mid-range as far as like its overall efficiency goes. Its damage is not too bad there, and it's really easy to use as well and stay on target, so I do like that one quite a bit. The RK9, the burst here is insane. I would consider this one to be absolute meta as well. If you again are good with burst style guns, it has that skill gap, it has that learning curve to it, but if you have this thing set up in a way that it is agile, aggressive. You can run and gun with this thing, and the bursts span pretty quick. Also with like the prestige attachment, it does take away the auto burst, but you can still just spray and pray it, and this thing fries. It is such a good close range option here. It's got an insane potential TTK if you're able to land all shots in the burst. It's just a matter of how good are you with burst guns. If that's not your feel, if that's not your style, then this probably to you is not absolute meta. It's probably more of like a contender here, but for those comfortable with this style of weapon, this thing is so good. The carbon I would consider probably to be more of a contender here. Its TTK compared to some of the other subs, even in the close range, is just not as good. It is relatively easy to use. It's obviously a little throwback to like the cordite and whatnot. It's a fun weapon for sure, but nothing that crazy as it stands. And then these last three subs, I'm not gonna lie, I have a really hard time definitively placing these in certain categories here, which to me ultimately leans towards meta contender, borderline contender. I don't think any of these are absolute meta. We can get that out of the way. The NPC's control is so iffy and really awkward that you either love this gun in a situation where it's like, okay, it's the MSMC, I'm hitting headshots, it's feeling good, or it just seems incredibly clunky and incredibly annoying to use. I'm just not really a fan of how this gun feels at the moment. It's got decent enough damage, so it's definitely, you know, competitive enough, but I think its overall feel might turn some players off. It's definitely borderline here between meta contender and contender. I guess I'd take it over the carbon, so probably more of like a meta contender here. The Raiden 45K, kind of awkward for the first damage range, and then in its mid-range, it's not too bad. It does have some control that you're gonna obviously have to focus on there as well. I'd probably lean towards this being more of a general contender. And then the Razor as well, just right here in the mix as far as the stats go. It's good in some fights and feels a little bit awkward in others. I'd probably say more of a general contender, though. You really have to load up on a lot of recoil attachments on some of these. Even for some close range, it feels a little bit odd. So the SMG category is kind of in an awkward spot right now. Next up, we've got our two LMGs, and luckily this is pretty easy here. These are both just like contender weapons here. Their TTKs are all right. The XM325's got a pretty fast TTK with that much faster fire rate and obviously a lot more recoil that's noticeable there, but it's still very manageable, especially if you're like, you know, tap firing or burst firing even like the first 5, 6, 7, 8 shots or something like that. It's certainly manageable. Obviously, the main thing with these though is their mobility. They're just not fast weapons, and this is a relatively fast game. So some of these rifles, some of these SMGs will ultimately be better across a lot of the maps in this game. But if you factor in the playstyle there, you're comfortable with that more relaxed, more so focused on choke points, holding down lines of sight. If you got your sights up, these are two very strong weapons, and that's what'll keep them in that contender category. We'll come back to snipers here in just a minute. As far as shotguns go here, these are all very fun. I actually enjoyed leveling these a lot, going for camos on these a lot. In general gameplay, the Akita, its damage is not going to be that insane. You really have to be up in the enemy's faces for this to be good. Like, this feels like it's a Nuketown in a face-off map style weapon, so that's more of just a viable choice in my opinion. But the Breacher, if you use this thing with Gung Ho, it is really, really strong. You can sort of like just hold down the trigger, charge it up, and run around at insane speed and hip fire the second you see somebody, and it's going to be a really strong option here. So it's super limited in range, obviously. That's what's going to keep it up, you know, from being absolute meta or anything like that, but it's a really strong option. And the Echo 12 also really strong too. You know, good damage, potential one shot there depending on your setup. Pretty aggressive as well. They do need some better sprint to fire in some cases. Like, that's a big thing with the shotguns this year. They all feel a little bit too slow to react in sometimes, but for the most part, the shotguns seem pretty well balanced this year, which is a nice surprise. Usually things are not going too crazy. Next up, we've got our Marksmans here. The M8, this thing is a laser. Like, it's actually super low recoil, pretty easy to consistently get those bursts down. I would consider this one to be more of a meta contender here. Its damage is not going to be as good as some rifles, but it's also going to be a lot easier to use despite the fact that it's a burst, because it is laser accurate. You just got to make sure you're landing those bursts back to back and you'll be set with this thing. It's pretty strong. Now the Warden here, it has some insane damage. Like, this thing has a really nice one-shot potential in multiplayer. The Nova line does as well. These are two tricky ones to rank as well, because it's kind of borderline meta contender and just a competitive weapon here, right? Because these each have decent skill gaps. The Warden, it's got some kick to it. If you're trying to shoot this thing fast and sort of spam it, you are going to be looking at the sun in a lot of cases. And that means if you're missing your shots and you're trying to quickly react and correct, you could be in a tricky situation there. The Nova line's not as difficult to use though. It's got that 2-round burst element to it, or you can flip into semi-auto. That's personally where I prefer it, but it does feel really consistent and really strong here. I would consider maybe this one's a little bit borderline higher in the meta contender category. These two, honestly, you could have an argument for flip-flopping, and ultimately that's a good thing when things are this close to like, oh, could be meta, it could be more competitive here. That just means things are really well balanced, and that's what I like to see. So that's really solid here too. Next up, as far as the pistols go, I mean, these are all pretty standard pistols, quite frankly. The Coda 9, it's going to be like a pocket SMG, but its damage is not going to be insane. Just going to be like a viable pistol if you want something that's going to be, you know, kind of, I guess, streamlined in a sense. I don't know if that's the right word, but like you don't have to think with it. It's just very easy. You can just pull it out and spray and pray. Obviously, these other ones, you have to spam the trigger fast on the Jaeger. You have to focus on the burst with the Velox. The Velox, honestly, is really strong with that burst, especially in the close range. It can be really, really good if you're good with burst style weapons and you're accurate. So that one's more of like a contender option, whereas the Jaeger just going to fall into that viable category. It's a semi-auto secondary. You're probably not going to be using it that much. I typically try and get one kill, and then I'll immediately switch to this, pick up the enemy's weapon, and then I've got two primaries, sort of a makeshift overkill there, but they're not bad pistols by any means. Then for our launchers here, really keep in mind, obviously we don't have the full tier on the graph here, but with the trash category, I would treat trash as either just downright awful weapons, obviously, but also niche, and that's just where the you know, launchers are going to fall. You're not using these for really anything outside of your camo challenges or taking down streaks. They're a niche style weapon. They're not really actually factoring into the overall meta here, and it's going to be the same deal with the melees, although I will say the flatline is a much better melee than the knife. The flatline, I got way better lunges, way better feel there. The knife, I would swing and miss and swing and miss. It was just so awkward to use. That one was not that fun. Now, as far as the snipers go, coming back to these, unfortunately, they're not fully on the chart here yet because the data is still being collected for them. Obviously, I've used all of them, though. As far as the recon goes, I would consider that to be an absolute meta option, so we'll just, like, you know, sort of paste that in there. Recon, absolute meta sniper, really good choice. Pretty fast ADS, especially when you prestige it. The prestige attachment's solid there. The Shadow, I would consider to be a meta contender here. It is semi-auto, so it's going to have that skill gap to it, but it's got insane power there. And then the Ion, the most trash weapon possible. I cannot stand that thing. The burst delay to it is miserable. The actual burst is really awkward and clunky because it's not always going like super accurate. The overall ADS sucks. The mobility sucks. The Ion is trash. But overall, I think the weapon balancing this year is honestly really good because a lot of these meta contenders, you could have arguments for being maybe absolute meta. A lot of the general competitive weapons, you could have arguments for being a true meta contender here, and it feels good. It doesn't feel like there's a definitive, oh, if I'm not using this gun, I'm losing everything, or I have to crutch to this, or I have to crutch to that. There's a lot of good parity in this current meta as it stands right now. So that is going to wrap things up for this one. If you guys enjoyed the video, if you found the information helpful, a like rating is always seriously appreciated. And if you're new here, you want to ensure you're up to date with everything going on in COD on a daily basis, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.